My name is Łukasz Kwieciński, and I am a manager at F-Secure, software engineers manager. And welcome to my talk. In this talk, I'm going to tell you a story on how DevOps and Agile work in practice together at F-Secure. At the core of the story, there are two industry standards: pipeline as code and Scrum. When applied, the technical practices of DevOps play out according to the books, just like it is in the theory. But something odd happened to the Agile frameworks. At the end of the story, we'll see how the CI/CD practices become the foundation for Agile way of working. And at the same time, the structured Agile frameworks like Scrum will seem to be much less substantial, or maybe from time to time even unnecessary. Before I start, I need to say that this is not a lecture, it's a report. So I am going to describe what I have seen without even trying to judging if it's good or not. And generally, I think that systems involving people and software are too complex to derive a generally applicable methodology. So the effective ways of working will vary between organizations and products and domains. So if I were to find just one idea I want to sell, that would be to use your own judgment. This talk is a result of a culture shock, which I went through and I'm probably still going through, having joined F-Secure a few months ago. This company is my third corporation, and wherever I've worked, the goals were roughly the same. It was to deliver the right thing, the best thing, in the shortest possible time. I've worked with .NET, Node.js, and Java teams, and it is clear to me that the choice of technology stack, languages, and frameworks has actually very little effect on how people work and how effective they are. That's why those Java versus C# or any kind of similar quarrels are so futile. So for this talk, I chose two elements which, from my observation, actually make a difference. One is human, and this is how people behave and what is their attitude towards each other, how they achieve objectives. And the other is technical, and that's how artifacts produced by those people are delivered to the customers, which I mean CI/CD. Both make up a mix, which is the DevOps culture. Going back to the shock which I went through. So when I joined F-Secure, I felt one thing in the air, and that was freedom. And this may have tasted like chaos, especially that's how I also felt it for someone who comes from a more structured corporate environment. Because how can teams be that much autonomous, because they have a free choice in how they organize themselves and even how they choose technologies? I will describe it in details in a moment. There are dozens of teams in F-Secure which live like cells in an organism, and there is almost no directive leadership, or if there is a directive leadership, then you can't really feel it. Instead, you've got this culture of negotiation and collective ownership. When we work on something bigger, on a project, then the teams reach out to each other, and there are no project managers. If you are a developer, then you will notice that there are no timesheets to fill. There is no central agile coaching institution, because the teams are not even required to have leaders or scrum masters. You stand and look at this, and just like I did, you ask yourself a question: how this could work, how this can work. Where is the skeleton which would stick all that autonomy together? What is bizarre, it's how I thought about it. It's like a blob-like organism. What does it grow around? And I think I found it in the remnants of the old-styled ancient ops department, the people who takes care of the product in production. There is only one such institution, and it sets standards on how code reaches the outer world. It is very tangible because, for example, you can find repositories with definitions of Jenkins jobs which contain jobs created by all the teams from the entire corporation. So you can clearly see it's a spine, a central spine. And I think that this ops makes this freedom happen. F-Secure is a land of Jenkinses, and we are code fanatics. Everything is code. So cloud stacks is code, which is pretty standard. Deployment pipelines is also code. So pipeline definitions live along the application code in the repositories. You create a new job by committing files to a designated repo. Configuration, even if it ends up in something like a store like Amazon SSM, it is code first. You configure a service by creating a pull request, and then there are scripts which take care of that later. And finally, and recently, even Jenkins instances are code. So there are repositories where you define a Docker image for Jenkins masters and agents, what plugins you want, and it effectively means that you've got a Jenkins building other Jenkins. That's how our ops moved much towards dev with this code-centric approach. And for our developers, it also means that they need to be in touch with the cloud technologies and the CI/CD technology, as it plays so important role in their everyday work, and they have such a high control over it. And this last example, the Jenkins as Docker, shows how autonomous a development team can become in this aspect. Through this self-service, the ops give us tools to have our own Jenkins instance where we can do whatever we want, whatever is effective for us. And each team is different. So each team will define the notion of being effective on their own. So how does it all influence the ways of working? There is a strong relation between agility and DevOps. Agility needs feedback. DevOps provides feedback. Working without planning much ahead makes sense only if you continuously verify that you are moving in the right direction. And also, if it is easy to correct your mistakes as you move along. So we really find out how we perform by releasing frequently and reliably. Historically, many teams years ago at F-Secure adopted Scrum independently without any central steering because it was a popular, well-known framework. Scrum is a bit like a sport of some kind. Every sprint, the team agrees a goal and then plays towards achieving it. And like sport, it's full of rules. The teams which adopt Scrum often start with, say, canonical form of it. So they will measure velocity, they will estimate in points in order to figure out how to plan their sprints. They will have dailies, Kanban boards, burn down charts, and all these ceremonies, the meetings about planning and reviews and demos and so on. And that's a lot of stuff. That's enough to distract you to the degree that you forget what this all is about, what this all is for. Nevertheless, Scrum works for some, and I can definitely hear the term sprint popping up in conversations between the teams all the time. The benefit is especially visible in those teams which historically valued individual effort and also had some problems with communication and transparency. So these are the teams which used to suck in tasks and you never knew when the results are back or what is going on. So you had great developers, but they did not share. One of my fellows called this kind of developer a developer prima ballerina. Now Scrum forces you to release often, and having a pipeline, a CI/CD pipeline, makes it easy to take you from a commit to production. So makes it possible to work on such a short release cycle. So you gain transparency. What you do is visible, and no doubt it is progress. But I've also seen an odd anomaly, a dysfunction emerging in those teams which moved from individual ownership with strong leaders to the collective responsibility and self-organizations. So now they are a team, but superficially. And it's interesting because the term team becomes something else, something what philosophers call an intersubjective being. I'll explain by example. If, for example, sit in a meeting carried out by the team, and you hear the team members exchanging ideas, and you can hear one member presenting his idea and ending this presentation with these words: "It is my opinion, but obviously it is for the team to decide." It sounds so strange because it is said by the member of this team, but it sounds like the team was something outside, something separate, independent living being. In a healthy group, one would say, how about trying this? And he would just address his fellows directly, but this does not always happen. And instead the notion of the team is used in a very similar way to how the notions of the empire or the party were used in the past. It's such a convoluted way to say we, which may really mean that I don't feel it's us, or we struggle to agree, or we might even not entirely like each other. In those cases, the Scrum seems like it imposes an alien concept of the team, which controls what we do, but we don't have a full influence on it. Even if the team is socially healthy and this symptom does not happen, then Scrum has another problem in it. It's boring. It's repeatable. Every sprint is following the same scheme of activities. It's like an unexciting sports discipline. So over time, people start losing its sense, and then they will start to question it. And if there are Scrum coaches flying around and trying to preach the religion which everyone has had already enough of, that can only piss people off. So wouldn't we be able to be effective, release often, and satisfy real needs without all that sprint planning, point estimation, velocity, etc.? In some teams at F-Secure, Scrum didn't settle in at all due to utter unpredictability. So the team tried, but they realized that the estimates that they were using to plan their sprints had nothing to do with their actuals. So was the team that bad? You would have to say that about multiple teams because it was more than one. What if the system is over 10 years old and it is so complex that the effort required to change it always surprises you? That was the case. Those teams stopped and they looked what was really needed, what was really expected. And it turned out that the goals were actually set quarterly, even though the product was released every 2 weeks. It's still released every 2 weeks. Product owners did not really care what was delivered each sprint. Estimates were needed only occasionally. What was important was that the teams were moving in the right direction, and it was transparent that there was a regular feedback where we are. As to velocity, whether it could be higher or lower, well, we just trust that our people do their best. In this case, why to estimate at all? Why to predict future? It's hard, it's time-consuming, and maybe, and sometimes it is just not required. So those teams adopted Kanban, but even then, some of them stripped it of its essential elements, like the work in progress limit. There was something more with those complex systems that required the assistance of CI/CD, and that factor which really matters is that reliability does not degrade. That's something that product owner must trust that whatever the team does, they will not break things down. And here again, it is the CI/CD pipeline by continuously running a ridiculous number of tests of various nature that makes sure that this won't happen, that this degradation will not occur. Testing is hard. Building correct test pyramid is challenging, and I've seen places in F-Secure and in other organizations where we just did not get it right. Sometimes the pyramid will stand upside down with tons of flaky end-to-end tests, which hit the UI and drive developers mad. Whatever bad can be said about those tests, they have one key strength. They are very likely to tell you that what you did actually doesn't make things worse. And also when they are run continuously, they show a trend in reliability. They need to be run continuously because they are so flaky that one run is not decisive. It will not tell you definitely what's going on. So that's a screenshot from our CI/CD monitoring tool, where you can see not only one test run, but multiple, and there is analysis which shows you which elements you should take care of. It's hard to release with this amount and nature of tests, but when you do release, it's very unlikely that you screw things up. And in fact, we didn't have a large significant error caused by putting into production something which was not really ready for production. Also, these tests have this have this property that they will prevent those integration issues from slipping through the pyramid. So the contract tests could take care of that, but it's a tricky thing. And some of them will take care of the syntax, of the syntactical boundary, also syntactical problems between the layers in the pyramid, but they will not take care of the semantics. So this is what our Docker containers and EC2 instances are busy with for some products, making sure that this huge amount of tests is continuously run, and that the team and the product owner can trust that whatever they change, it does not decrease the reliability. I'm trying not to say quality, because quality is something bigger. The teams I was just talking about retained some of Scrum ceremonies, that's dailies, regular refinements, retrospectives. Now I'm going to touch a more extreme effect of trust, autonomy, and CI/CD on Agile. And that's something which happened to another team. That's our Windows antivirus client team. Their process is even simpler. But in order to tell that, I need to focus for a moment on diversity. It's hard not to recognize that diversity plays a huge role in Agile development. And in general, it's good if you have a team of multidisciplinary people who actually talk to each other. They will together deliver more and better. And now, the diversity can be understood in two ways. One way is that you have a team composed of complementary matter experts. So you've got front-end developer, back-end developer, a DevOps, a QA, all very fluent in their narrow discipline, and they are working together to get something better. There's also another kind of diversity. It's when people in the team are ready to do anything. So even if they are not experts in every field. And this latter mode of diversity is much more demanding. Many people will say no. They will just not want to do that. And I remember one of my colleagues from the past who said in this very context, he said, specialization is the thing which made this country great. He actually meant a different country, but he was thinking about the production lines, about engineering, followed by other steps. And he thought about himself as an expert. So for him, it was definitely much more natural that people should specialize and work together. You shouldn't be everything. But if you do agree to be everything, then this means that you are brave. This coincides with this value, which is associated with Agile, that is courage. It's not that widespread, but when it shows up, like it is in this team that I am referring to, then the things get really odd. And I'm going to tell you now how. With Scrum, like in a play, Scrum sets a well-known distinction of roles, especially the Scrum Master and Product Owner. There is no explicit leader in Scrum. Actually, one would say that this is a no-no to have a real leader there, but in reality, people organize themselves around leaders. If you have a group of people, there will be usually a formal or informal leader in it. This leader role is hard to skip. And in fact, there can be different leaders or different owners responsible for different things, different fields. And then the product owner is really a product leader. What members of this Windows antivirus client team noticed is that having any kind of leader in any field creates a bottleneck. It is not different than dealing with a single core CPU, and very much visible in external team-to-team communication. The leadership theorists will want the leader to be a proxy, representing entire team to the outside. But then this poor guy becomes a bottleneck because he has to handle multiplexing of the communication between the team and the outer world. Even if delegating to others, he will always be seen as the person who knows most, who is best informed, and he will be overwhelmed. He will become a bottleneck. So our Windows antivirus client, this team, being inspired by no one else but their leader, they decided that they will try their best not to have any. So what would that be? Would that be a pure form of collective utopia, something promised by Scrum theorists or anarchists? It's something very practical, and it boils down again to individual versus collective ownership. Remember what I said about the team and the way how it is kind of externalized, anthropomorphized. Like in many other organizations, in F-Secure, the teams own services. And the problem is, if staff is owned by a group of people, then it is not really owned by me, even if I am a member of this team. It's like with the state in the socialist economies. State property isn't my property, even if it is my state. That's one thing which makes the Windows antivirus client different. They very much emphasize the personal ownership of problems and ideas. So the team still owns services, but the members within the team own tasks. It's not roles, it's ad hoc tasks from the beginning to end. These are the tasks to build and maintain those services. It's the level of individualism, which is very similar to the one attributed to developer prima ballerina. That is a person which takes full responsibility for all aspects. If he has a task, he does everything from talking to people beyond the team, through architecture, design, UI, UX, development, and testing to demos. Just is responsible for all. And it means that we now are aiming at having a team of prima ballerinas who actually talk to each other. So did it work in practice? It did, with an interesting result. Because in effect, one effect is that the product owner involvement is minimal. I will elaborate on that in a moment. There is no backlog. They completely dropped this concept. The team actively looks for problems and ideas by talking to stakeholders, other teams, sales engineers. Refinement is not a meeting. Now that a person is personally a member, is personally responsible for figuring out the what, how, and why of the tasks, then obviously this still happens, the refinement process happens, but it's not a meeting with team versus product owner. They may consult, developers may consult other developers, and they do consult other developers. That's a normal social behavior, but it's just not that formalized. It's all ad hoc. It's not needed. Some kind of facilitator is needed for the 2 remaining cyclic meetings. This role is rotated, so everyone is capable of doing everything, so everyone is also capable of doing facilitation. Communication is continuous. This means that dailies, the stand-ups, is unnecessary ceremony. It just happens all the time. And from those meetings, the 2 ones which are left are kind of planning, but it's not really planning. It's just a sync. They sit in front of a whiteboard and at the beginning of a week, and every member of the team says, I'm going to start this week with this one task, or maybe I will do this another task. But beyond that, I'm not trying to think what it's going to be. I'm not committing to anything. I will do my best with this task first. And next time I'm going to work on something else, we'll just have a chat. I will speak to you, not to the team. And as soon as this meeting ends, the plan is not reviewed. It's thrown away. It's just a sync. The other meeting which remains from this Scrumish origins is retrospective, because this entire process has been created not out of the thin air. It's been created over years by minute improvement steps, and retrospective was a crucial part of it, and it still remains. Now going back to the role of the product owner. Following the extreme interpretation of being multidisciplinary, so everyone can do everything, the members of this team ask themselves a question if the product owner role could also be shared between the members of the team. As you can guess, they answered yes. And this means that it happens to the degree, well, higher than usually, higher than expected. This team has got to the level of maturity where it takes responsibility normally allocated to the product owner. Product owner doesn't have to be involved in everyday work with the team. He doesn't have to show up in any regular meetings. If he needs, he can just approach the team and talk to people, but there's nothing regular on his calendar. And for sure, he is not there to write and explain details of user stories. On the other hand, he trusts that the team will make the best tactical decisions as to the look and feel, the behavior of the features, and even the short-term priorities of the items that they are going to work on. It means that developers don't run the product owner asking him for details of his vision, because they own vision. It's their vision. They don't have to ask anyone. And this removes yet another bottleneck, because there is 10 of them and only one product owner. That is a bottleneck removed from their daily activities. At the same time, the product owner is busy with some other stuff, because he has much more important tasks to be carried out outside of the team, offline. It's things like checking competitive landscape or thinking strategy through, doing user research, analytics, marketing, and more. In this Windows antivirus client team, if a developer has an idea to try, he will just code it, and through the pipeline, he will put it into production. Obviously, there is a code review. He has to test it. It's his responsibility to organize testing for it. He may test it himself, or he may ask someone. And when I said that when he has an idea to try, I didn't mean that an idea for a solution to something which was put into the backlog by someone else. No, there is no backlog. It's an idea from the beginning to the end, something he comes up with by listening to others, and he can just take care of it from the beginning to end. And this is all possible because it's made easy and safe by the CI/CD pipeline, plus we've got this specific culture and courage within the team to make it go. This Windows antivirus client team is recognized within organization for its effectiveness because they release features valued by customers. They have a fair idea what is good for the product, so they will pull for work items by asking around what should be done next. They don't expect to have anything in the backlog. No one tries to build a backlog for them. They release to production whatever they find reasonable. They get customer feedback, and the customer feedback is the ultimate measure of quality. Test automation is just to prevent degradation of reliability. Obviously, this team enjoys an extreme trust within organization. And this trust is, the rationale behind this trust is those years of effectiveness. They have been recognized for being effective. Although we are not measuring ourselves. On the other hand, we don't have a proof that this is ideal. Probably it isn't. Nevertheless, they make changes, small steps, small improvements, and the processes I described now, for sure, well, I actually described the process from before pandemics, so now it is already a bit different, and it will change in future too. What's important is that with this personal freedom within the team, there is a risk that something goes wrong. If it goes wrong, they will just roll back. This CD makes it possible, safe, and easy, and the product owner could be equally wrong. So I've described what happens in just a few teams, and I said that in F-Secure we have dozens of them, and it's very likely that each team will work in a different way, slightly different way. So my takeaway probably is that it doesn't really matter how you work, as long as you are happy and effective. There is one common part. It's this continuous delivery. Now that it's settled in, it acts like a skeleton around which the teams may freely experiment and grow their practices, those practices which fit them best, fit best their domain, their product, their personalities. It might be that in F-Secure, maybe in general, it's the continuous delivery, which is the only widely accepted and used standard framework of Agile. And everything around it, I mean, the practices related to people, the people-oriented practices that grow around the CD, CI pipeline and the DevOps practices, all those practices are just an optimization. Thank you very much for listening. I hope maybe you found some common points between our ways of working and your ways of working. As I said, it's a report and it will change. This is how we work. I found it extremely interesting. Should you have any questions, please do post in the chat. Thank you very much.